the moment, I'm watching my house burn down. It's going down in front of me. The roof is falling in. It's in flames, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Fire has shaped Australia's landscape for millions of years. Aboriginal people used fire as a tool. They burnt the land in what is now called fire stick farming. Cleared areas made travelling and hunting easier. Fire was part of their lives. But fire got in the way of the lives of the European settlers.
For some countries, the danger is earthquake. For others, like America, it's the tornado. In Australia, the enemy is bushfire. Nothing can stop the flames. It's like a napalm attack.
The Black Friday fires of 1939 claimed 71 lives. The 1967 Tasmanian fires, 62 lives.
Some 1,400 houses and buildings destroyed, some 4,000 people homeless.
The Ash Wednesday fires of 1983 left 76 people dead and destroyed 2,400 homes. One of them belonged to radio journalist Murray Nicol.
The fire hit so hard, so fast, that places were catching fire so quickly, though it was almost as though they were exploding in flames.
We live in the most fire-prone continent on Earth. Some fires in remote areas burn for months. Seen from space, part of our continent is always burning. But fire is alien to our way of life. Too often, people don't know what to do when it confronts them.
We didn't think we were in any danger. Next thing, we see smoke coming from that side. At that point, my wife and baby collected everything they could and threw them into the car. They've driven to her mother-in-law's place. And now things have got worse. There's been a fire just 2 doors down there on the corner. Yeah. It's a real worry because, as you can tell, the leaves that are burning, and there's like fire down there. You can't even see it through the thick smoke, but it's only about 100 metres down there. You going to stay with it? Well, I asked the fire guys whether or not to go, and they said they'll let us know when it's time to go. A few of the other people in the street are in the same predicament. We've had a talk, and they're just going to wait until the authorities tell us to move. But, you know, I don't really want to go unless I have to.
Bushfires generally only cause concern when they threaten humans or property. And it's not just those in rural areas. The Sydney fires in 1994 and 2002 struck right at the heart of suburbia.
Red, Channel 81, red.
Roger, make yourself safe. Group 3 cannot get to you, over.
Just do the best they can. Don't waste their time. We've got a fire. It's just gone berserk. We can only do our best. Make sure they're safe, but don't tire their space. Over.
Canberra found itself in a similar situation in 2003.
Whipped along by winds strong enough to uproot huge gum trees, it came with the deadly force of a blitzkrieg.
But as traumatic as these fires were, they fade from memory all too quickly.
The lesson from history is that we don't learn from history. And so often you'll see, for example, that a house is rebuilt in exactly the same way, exactly the same house as was burnt. You know, in 1983, you see the house rebuilt in exactly the same place 3 or 4 years later.
Murray Nicol fears some of his neighbours in the Adelaide Hills will have to learn the hard way.
Most of the people here now have come up from the city, and you can tell their houses because they've got prissy little city-type gardens, and they've never been up here in a fire, probably never seen a bushfire in their lives. They don't know the sort of risks they're taking.
It's quite clear that we haven't really understood fire in terms of where we build houses. North-facing slopes at the top of cliff lines. It's a wonderful view, spectacular place, but it's going to fry pretty repeatedly and going to fry pretty intensively. And so you've really got to take a few steps back and say, well, is that a smart place to build a house? Is that a sensible place to expect our volunteer firefighters to have to protect that asset on a regular basis?
And as our cities sprawl, urban areas push further into forests and grasslands.
In some parts of the state, we have houses growing faster than grass. You have to see it to believe it. You fly across in a helicopter one day where there wasn't a housing estate, now there is.
The Australian population is incredibly urbanised, one of the most urbanised populations on the planet. And there's an enormous dislocation from the environment. In large part, a lot of Australians are now dealing with what I call nature deficit disorder. People are more likely to know who plays full forward for Essendon in the AFL than know very much about the forests that are just an hour and a half's drive from the MCG.
If you move from Melbourne out to the back blocks and you have a glorious view over the mountains and you have trees all around you and the road coming in's a 4-kilometre dirt road, a fire truck's not going to get to you. We have to educate those people to make sure they look after themselves.
The Country Fire Authority was born after the 1939 Black Friday fires. It's responsible for protecting privately owned land throughout the state of Victoria.
It's grown from post-war era, from a dad's army, into a significant emergency management agency that covers most of the state of Victoria. No longer just does bushfires, does all of the things that a normal fire service would do. We have an organisation that's almost as big as the Australian military. It has over 1,500 buildings. That's more buildings than McDonald's has in the whole of Australia. It has an education facility which is bigger than any of the TAFEs, and 60,000 volunteers. There aren't many employers that have 60,000 people working for them.
My volunteers range from housewives to mums, to young mums, right through to retired farmers. We're very passionate and very dedicated.
Southeastern Australia is the worst place for bushfires, partly because it's relatively densely populated, but mostly because it experiences hot, dry northerlies and violent changes when the wind blows in from the sea, making its climate particularly volatile.
Victoria only needs a week of hot weather and a northerly wind, and somewhere in the state we have significant fires. So that's the cry wolf. Oh, this year is going to be the worst. This was going to be the worst season ever. Absolute rubbish. Every year in Victoria is a dangerous year, and all we need is 5 or 6 days and we're in trouble.
In 2005, that trouble arrived on New Year's Eve. There's a scale called the Fire Danger Index. The hotter, drier and windier, the higher the scale rises. Anything over 7 is considered high. New Year's Eve 2005, it measured a staggering 99.
New Year's Eve was a stinker. It was 43 degrees under my veranda at home. The wind was coming from the north, and I'd say between 50 and 60 kilometres an hour it was gusting at. So it was just a real stinker of a day. And it just had that feeling about it, that you knew something was going to happen. And I was hoping it wouldn't happen in our patch of dirt, but it did. We'd had some dry lightning come through a few days beforehand. The lightning had gone down, split the tree, the roots were smouldering, then the temperature picked up, the wind got strong, and it just brought out a couple of little flames, little embers, and woof, she was gone.
At least 2 houses southwest of Stawell have been destroyed, with a third believed to have also burnt down. The CFA says several more properties are under threat. The fire, which has so far burnt out over 800 hectares of land, started in the Illawarra State Forest.
This was a running grass fire with extreme temperatures. Humidity was right down, so everything's tender dry, And with the wind behind it, it was just an aggressive, hot fire.
11-year-old Bella recorded her experience of the fire.
Oh my God. That house is about to burn.
That's just the shed.
No, there's a house behind it. Look, Dad. Can I zoom in? Daddy, this is really dangerous. Can I stop recording?
Bella's mother had been caught by the fire whilst delivering horses to a neighbour's property.
One down the window. Look at her pants.
Yes, she is. There's a house training back there. I was in the house. Just put a dog in the house. Come back to the door, couldn't see a bloody thing. I thought these two were gone. It was a miracle you survived.
Dad, I can't film. I need to protect my eyes.
When I finally decided to go, it was too late. I could see the fire, the flames, basically approaching where I was going to get out of. So I pulled the float and vehicle up against the shed, and Karina and I huddled there and crossed our fingers. And it went right over the top of us. And we ran around, hosing horses, putting out spot fires. And then partway through, actually, the CFA arrived and they came and helped. They came and helped with the shed, didn't they? I was up the other end.
We were dead looking. We were dead looking. Just put them in. We drove round and pumped. Up in flames. That's amazing.
Right, I haven't let another float yet.
There you go.
I haven't let the horses out of the float yet. They're still there. I don't want to make them.
They're really sweaty. It's getting hot in here. Whoa, look at that, Dad. They're sweaty.
Mike's cross at me now because I flooded the bathroom and the laundry. And he's cross because the carpet's dirty.
While the ordeal is already over for some, many more wait anxiously as the fast-moving fire continues to push rapidly south, skirting the town itself and burning on into the night.
The blazes swept through about 9,000 hectares of bush and farmland around Stawell, damaging dozens of properties and gutting 5 houses.
I can remember leaving the headquarters somewhere before midnight and going home and having a shower. My family wasn't there. I was in the house empty on my own because the family's down the beach having New Year's Eve. I hear all the noise and fireworks and horns tooting for midnight, and sorry, but I wasn't overly enthused.
Everyone's out there celebrating, drinking as much alcohol as their body can contain. In another part of the state, there are people who are losing homes.
Morning reveals the destruction left in the fire's wake.
The surrounding devastation was echoed on the face of 75-year-old Barbara Repper, her home of 50 years stolen by a fireball direct from hell.
I can't cope with devastation.
And she managed to flee just in time with what little she had.
I grabbed my handbag and my asthma medication, and I didn't have time to get anything else, and they were yelling, "Get out, get out, get out."
And I can remember driving down that track and the ash was blowing all over the car and the wind and the smell, the suffocation, just horrible. And then, panic. Remain calm? No, I wasn't.
Stawell resident Robin Smith decided to stay at her house and protect it. Thanks to careful preparation and a little luck, she managed to save her home.
It was incredibly fast fire. I'd say probably went past our fences at about 100 metres a second. That's what it felt like anyway. Incredible, hot, quick flames, especially on the open ground, with dancing flames on top of them. And my husband said he saw a flame jump 300 metres.
And the people that stayed and defended, I've got admiration, because it would have been bloody scary. So, no, I think people did well that day.
The heat was intense, the noise of it, the roaring, the ash, was just the whole combination of it all, I think, that just puts the fear of God into you.
Australians are still coming to grips with what to do when faced with fire. To stay and defend their property, or to flee. Many wait and see, often resulting in leaving at the last possible moment, not realising that this is the most dangerous option of all. The statistics after the Ash Wednesday fires clearly showed that fleeing at the last moment was deadly. Of the 46 fatalities in Victoria, almost all died out in the open. Only 7 people died in their houses, and 6 of them were elderly. History has a habit of repeating itself.
Older people are the hardest hit. They couldn't run, they couldn't fight. When the smoke clears, 54 are dead. Still more bodies could be hidden in the ruins. The flames struck to within 1.5 miles of the Hobart GPO. Suburban homes worth many thousands of dollars were lost, along with rows of shanties on the southern edge of town.
The 67 fire, the Hobart fire, was very important because in fire history in Australia, in post-war fire history, because it was the first major urban interface fire. Something like 1,300 houses were destroyed. Over 60 people lost their lives. Approximately half of those who died while fleeing the fire fled houses that did not burn down. Fleeing at the last minute may not be a very smart idea. Staying in your house and protecting it could be a very good idea. And I think most of us are trained that from childhood that when there's a fire, you flee the building. Essentially in a bushfire, you have the landscape's on fire. And if you're outside, you are part of that landscape, which is on fire. If you have some haven that can protect you for a short period, minutes in the case of a grass fire, 10 minutes to 20 minutes in the case of a bush or forest fire, what you're after is some way of shielding you from the heat, the smoke, the embers, and so on. One of the problems in this whole enterprise is to find a way of preparing people mentally without actually going through a terrifying or a major fire. And we haven't really got there yet.
Murray Nicol experienced and recorded the terrifying ordeal of sheltering with neighbours during the Ash Wednesday fires.
We are crouching down behind a farmhouse. There are children. The sky is red and then white. It's going crazy. The fire's jumped 100 feet high, 150 feet high, straight over the top of Green Hill Road. There are 12 people here with me. We can hardly breathe. There is white with heat and smoke, and it's red, and there are women crying, and there are children here, and we are in trouble.
A number of studies, especially following Ash Wednesday in Victoria and South Australia, showed that the most important factor in whether a house survived the fire or not is whether somebody's in the house at the time. 90% of the houses with an occupant survived. If there was no occupant, 30% survived.
Most houses burn down long after the firefront has passed. Burning debris, fanned by strong winds, starts small fires wherever it lands on something flammable. It's these ember attacks that destroy houses.
It's about actively defending the house, putting out the ember fires, being active in the face of the fire front, not about sheltering passively in a corner of the house.
While it may be impossible to fully mentally prepare for the fire, physical preparations are easier. And the advice about what work needs to be done hasn't changed much. Cleaning up, clearing debris, and wetting down anything flammable is still the advice today.
Make sure you wet any wood down thoroughly. Doesn't hurt to wet the whole house down. And all your posts.
Robin's careful preparations paid off. But for some of the Stawell residents, the rain that arrived on New Year's Day came too late.
We went from firefighters who were out there dealing with a fire to firefighters complaining about getting wet. And of course there was this feeling that the fire was out, it's rained. Sadly there was not enough rain to put the fire out. crews were there for weeks and weeks to secure that fire, simply because that's the type of countryside it was and there was not enough rain to deal with those matters.
That's where your bedroom was, there's the bunk.
One Stall family returned from a swim to confront the shock of what had been their home.
He stayed in the pen. Yeah.
This fire affected me more than any others. You go out to a fire, when I get in my vehicle or somebody gets into an appliance, they are going out to get to that fire and to put it out and to stop the loss and the damage to people. This didn't stop. We couldn't do it. We couldn't stop it.
Another Stall resident was met with a similar scene.
I was in the Snowy Mountains, friends and some family having a New Year's Eve party, and I started to get some phone calls coming through early in the night that there were fires in my area. I thought, no, my place will be right.
Peter Caneen is a good friend of Julie's. It's Julie who discovered Peter's house burning.
I had to make the decision as a captain and take the friendship away and just say to the guys, let it go, let it burn, it's gone. We can't do anything to save it now.
And I actually contacted Julie early that morning as I was racing over the Snowy Mountains.
And I just said to Pete, I am so sorry, but your house is gone and there's nothing. Just watch anything above you. It was important for me to be able to look after Peter through this part of it. I mean, he's a friend, he's a mate.
Looking at the unburnt side and the fact that next door stayed and was okay, probably 30% chance I would have stayed and possibly 70% I would have run, because I did fight the last big one here at Stall, just with a little private tanker, and it's pretty terrifying. They're extraordinary situations to find yourself in, and the sound, it's just mind-boggling.
If Peter was home, he would have saved his house, no doubt. There were 8 houses, I believe, that were lost that day. The way it made me feel, I devastated. I hit a brick wall at about 10 o'clock. I asked to be brought back to the station here, and I was speaking to the instant controller, and I broke down. They said to go home and, just rest. It wasn't my fault, and I know now it wasn't my fault, but at the time I felt it was. I took a lot on my shoulders. I needed counselling to get over it because it really affected me that much.
You're looking a bit bucket, mate.
Oh, yeah. It's all fun. It's all part of it.
When I joined in the early 70s, you were a wuss if you got anybody, if you actually felt any emotion. You bottled everything up and there was no one there to talk to. Move along 30 years, where CFA is now, you have a fully integrated peer support group. You have people trained in support. It's an acceptance that you're not a hero. It isn't something to be ashamed of if you ask for help. And by the way, you are human.
Stall residents will meet on Thursday to determine how to organise the recovery from the weekend's fire. The number of houses destroyed has risen to 11. 7,500 hectares of land has been burnt and almost 1,500 sheep lost.
At the moment, there's a lot of funny feelings going on inside everybody's bodies and minds at the moment, and it's all quite normal to do with the trauma that we've all just experienced.
Getting things back to normality can be very healing, I believe, for a lot of these people. So it'll take time, and I think come next summer, if we have some very hot days with northerly winds, we'll all be a little bit reticent, but more aware, more prepared, and we just hope that no one else has to go through it again.
But those hot days are on the increase. It seems each year beats the last as the hottest on record, as global warming takes hold.
we're going to have longer summers, drier summers, and we also may have the thunderstorm activity that we have now in Sydney, which means more lightning strikes and more dry storms, which means more fires.
It is unrealistic for us as a community to expect, living in one of the most fire-prone parts of the world, that we're not going to, as a community, suffer loss. Our game that we play is all about trying to minimise that.
While some in Stawell count their losses, Robin and her husband are counting their blessings. Little were they to know what was in store in just 3 weeks' time.
And we've got Robin on the line again with reports that that very area is currently under attack. Hi, Robin.
Good evening, Kat. Oh, I don't think it's good evening.
Can you believe this?
I
3
cannot.
weeks.
Yeah, cannot. We're all wet down again. You can't see much. We can't see a fire front as yet. It absolutely stinks outside and the wind is blowing a gale. It's rather scary because it's directly in front of where I'm looking now.
Since New Year's Eve, the state has completely dried out. All of the grasslands are now dry. The state is dry and ready to burn.
To the Weather Bureau, Terry Ryan, good morning again.
It looks like a heatwave pattern from Friday onwards.
It's going to be a scorcher, is it?
Temperatures close to 40 and a late change.
Whoa.
Thunderstorms strike, igniting one of Victoria's worst fire weekends in many years. On Friday morning, a farmer reports smoke in the Grampians National Park in Western Victoria.
In all my time in the Grampians, I've never known a fire to start from a lightning strike at 10 o'clock at night and actually burn all night. Instead of just staying within that tree all night, it actually climbed down out of the tree, and by the time we found the fire at 8 o'clock the next morning, the fire was already 12 hectares in size.
The Grampians fire is on public land, and so putting it out is the responsibility of the Department of Sustainability and the Environment, the DSE.
One of the issues with this country is that it's, as you can see, it's quite steep, rocky, pretty inhospitable sort of terrain, and areas that we can't use machinery in very easily. Until we can get a track into the edge of the fire with a bulldozer or something like that, then it's difficult to put ground crews in, because they've got to have access, they've got to have safety zones and safe places to work from.
We knew about the fire out at the Grampians at Mount Lubra, thinking, why in the hell isn't somebody getting in there and putting it out?
We relied pretty much on aircraft at the early stages.
We had our fire bombers on the way and they worked on the fire all morning. We got helicopters up from Melbourne. They were here by 11 o'clock, and then we got the Ericsson Sky Crane. Elvis as it's known up here, and they worked on it all day. A lot of firefighters, both guys and gals up there, busting their gut that day. People found it extremely difficult to work, and round one went to the fire.
As the weekend heats up, the Country Fire Authority Chief, Russell Rees, must decide on the extent of the total fire ban for Sunday.
So at this point in time, I'm saying, unless no one has violent objectives, we run for the whole state. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, it's a no-brainer in one sense.
Look, just to let you know, total fire ban's been declared for the whole of the state tomorrow.
The CFA is also ordering more crews to Gippsland in Victoria's east, where a deliberately lit fire that has been burning for several days is now raging through pine plantations and threatening farms.
We've got a big hay shed over here. It's our sole supply of hay. We're creating a heap of bare earth around it so that we can give it some protection from any ground fire coming in off the paddocks, and hopefully we'll be able to get tankers here to wet the hay down in the shed and stop any ember attack starting a fire in the shed. But that'll only be luck.
And for the first time since New Year's Eve, a Victorian town is threatened by bushfire. The Erica community gathers to consider its options.
Make a decision as to whether you're going to stay or go, and start to make preparations for that decision, whatever it is. If you're going to go, you need to work out what you're going to take. You know, we're going to take the house title. You're definitely going to take the house insurance papers, I would think. But you have photos, marriage certificates, insurance, you know, things that will make it easy to start life over again if you have to.
We've got 2 jobs that are now threatening towns. What's the town that's under threat? And Stieglitz.
Okay, there it is, up there.
This fire is becoming a problem as it takes hold in the stringy bark forests which border Anarchy.
We first heard about the fire on the Saturday evening, and we have a very effective fire phone tree, and we're in constant contact with each other, the neighbours up and down the road. The information was that it was under control and that we were under no immediate threat, but to be wary.
We were fairly prepared for the fire in that I'd expected for years that we were going to have a fire here. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen. So we were fairly well prepared. In terms of what I thought our chances were, I thought we had a 90% chance of saving the house with the 6 of us here. In terms of saving ourselves, I thought we had a 100% chance.
It's a hot Saturday night following the 44-degree day. There are 70 fires still burning. The exhausted crews battle on, desperate to contain as many fires as possible before Sunday's predicted scorcher.
774 ABC Melbourne and ABC Victoria, your emergency services network. Bushfire information.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Bedford, and today has been declared a day of total fire ban for the whole state of Victoria. The Country Fire Authority reminds you if you live in a high-risk area to implement your personal fire plan. But let's go, first of all, to the Grampians region. We have with us Jeff Evans, who's the incident controller for the Grampians fire. Good morning to you, Jeff.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm really well. It's a big day around the state, isn't it?
It is a very big day. I said to someone this morning that this will probably be a day that we remember for a long time, I think, the way it's shaping up.
I just said to the guys, gut feeling, we're going to be required, and we organised ourselves a crew to be able to turn out if needed very quickly. And I said to those people, you go home, you eat and you sleep, you get food organised and you get drink organised. I said, because I can see we'll be going out somewhere. And I spoke, there was quite a lot of activity happening here in the fire station, and I spoke to the group officer, Kevin Irwin, and said, my brigade is ready to turn out, and if they're going, I want to be the strike team leader. I want to be able to look after them and protect them.
It's the same story across the state, as crews everywhere prepare for the worst.
The Brisbane Rangers now, I think that one was contained overnight near Stieglitz?
Yeah, that's right. That was contained sometime early after midnight, but the weather is getting quite warm and, more worryingly, quite windy at the moment, particularly through all of Western Victoria. So firefighters will have a fairly difficult time today holding that fire and keeping it within the control lines, but we've got our fingers crossed on that.
But I still wasn't comfortable looking at the forecast ahead for Sunday. I was far from being comfortable, and I actually drove into the region headquarters to sit down with them and do some pre-planning for Sunday, because I just had the feeling that it was going to break out. I think it was always going to break out. It was a matter of when it broke out.
On Saturday night around about 8 o'clock, I went out on the fire truck. I was out all of Saturday night and got back around about 8 o'clock, 8:30 Sunday morning. So I already knew at that point that we were in trouble.
About 12:30 we got a call from one of the CFA members to say that they had lost the containment line and that the fire had started moving through, and we needed to be aware of that and to put our fire plan in action.
We prepared first thing in the morning and spent most of the day sitting on the veranda just waiting for the wind change.
At 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon, there are 10,000 firefighters battling 92 going fires across the state. 17 have started since the morning, and the exact locations of 8 reported fires are yet to be determined. DSE's FireScan aircraft is used for surveillance. It takes infrared thermal images of precisely where the fires are. This season, for the first time, these images can be beamed back to headquarters in less than 15 minutes. The red-hot patches give a clear view of the fire front and the spot fires. This creates a statewide picture of the fires for those making decisions about resources and tactics.
There's some tough decisions being made about aircraft, and we're moving entirely on priority, and there'll be some more tough decisions and aircraft moving quite aggressively around the state.
All the 35 state aircraft are being used. Twice that many will be needed. On Sunday, the big fires are too large for the aircraft to put out. All they can do is build up lines of red retardant to slow the fires and water bomb patches of forest and individual properties.
As a water bombing pilot, when you do see, once again, assets under threat, quite often it almost laps their backyard. And then when you actually do drop water on it and you slow down the fire, that is rewarding.
You sort of get a bit of an eye for, you know, how high you are, and you've got to sort of allow for the wind if it's, you know, a really windy day, and you can sort of watch where the water's falling out the window as you're dropping it. So it's all very a visual sort of a thing.
One hit won't take it out. It just needs persistent work, and the next person follows your work, the next person follows your work. And so it does need this coordinated and ongoing and often very fatiguing bang, 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 bang to get these things out. You do expect to be buffeted, and you can feel the heat of the fires. We man attempting to control is really, as I say, it's pissing into wind.
While aircraft have been protecting property around the state, what happens next in the Grampians, no one could have predicted. The fire rages out of the Grampians National Park and into open country. Out here, the fire moves even faster through the dry grass. A line of defence has been set up on the first road the fire will attempt to cross. There are 25 tankers and over 100 firefighters. Without the firefighters realising it, the fire has spotted ahead of them. One tanker gets trapped.
They saw that they were getting themselves in a difficult spot, so they tried to get back to burnt ground, and it just hit them that quickly they couldn't. So the fire was outrunning the truck. We have a safety and survival drill. The driver and the radio operator in the cabin, they get down, they cover themselves with the red fire blanket and put a mayday message over the radio. The firefighters on the back of the appliance, they cover themselves with the fire blankets and they set up fog nozzles. There is a certain pressure that you put it at. If you put it too fine, the heat will evaporate the water. They did the safety and survival drill that we teach people, and it saved their lives. And it worked, thank God. It must be scary, because I wouldn't want to go through it.
It's out here.
Is that what?
The Grampians fire has just moved itself up to top priority.
No, it's out in the private property. That's all technical term.
Myself and a few others went up onto Big Hill and had a look and watched the smoke building, and then wow, this. And I remember making the comment, this will create its own thunderstorm, because that's how intense the smoke was.
The only lightning we had in Victoria on that day, because it was a hot, dry day, was in the plume from that fire. And we can, we've got imagery that we can show where the lightning strikes were on that day, and that fire was actually spreading through spotting, through the fire running, and through lightning strikes. It was causing its own lightning.
The fire creates energy and releases heat and moisture. This triggers the thunderstorm. The Grampians thundercloud is over 10 kilometres high, much higher than the one formed by the Canberra fires in 2003.
Something of that scale you might see once every 5 or 10 years.
It took a wind change to break up this thundercloud, but the change created an even bigger problem. It's 4 p.m. And the predicted cool change from the southwest is moving across the state. A cool change doesn't always help firefighters. They can be a time bomb. And this bomb is about to land on Anarchy.
You're waiting to see what happens, as I understand it, Trevor, when the wind change does come through.
If the wind change comes through as predicted, it's going to be fairly horrific because the fire is burning on such a large front that if the wind goes round to the southwest, it's virtually going to push it straight through to us. Yeah, look, it's just the speed of this fire at the moment is unbelievable.
Are we talking, sorry to interrupt there, Bob, are we talking about homes within Anarchy itself or on the outskirts?
Homes on the outskirts of Anarchy are directly under attack at the moment.
All of a sudden just went from something that was slow moving to something that was just so fast. There was no noise, it was very, very windy, and the smoke was all very high, wasn't anything ground level, but I think the speed of it is the thing that I actually got quite scared with in the end. I just, 1 minute it's trickling along and the next minute it's full fury, and when I started seeing the flames above the treetops, yeah, then certain elements of fear started rising in me.
One fellow, a lieutenant from the CFA, he rang us 2.5 hours before the fire or 3 hours before the fire and said, look, I've just been looking at a map, it is going to get you. Get ready, it is going to get you. And that was awfully helpful.
I think I said something like I could be a liability here if it gets too drastic, and that maybe if we're going to move, we move soon.
As Christine and her husband leave their home in Anarchy, the situation further west in the Grampians escalates.
To Jeff Evans now, who's the incident controller with the DSE for the Grampians. Hello, Jeff.
G'day, Lindy.
How is it?
Not very good. Not very good at all, Lindy. It's gone from a picture at 2 o'clock where this fire was about 2,000 hectares, blown out now at 5 o'clock, around about the 20,000 hectares. Everyone out there is just so frantic at the moment. But no, this is in the last 3 hours, this has just blown out to a major big fire. At this stage, we're saying between 20 and 25,000 hectares.
About 5 o'clock, we got the phone call that we were needed in Paul's Gap. I think in the back of all our brains was what we went through with the Deep Lead fire, with our New Year's Eve fire. I know when I left home that evening, my partners in the police force gave them a hug goodbye, and I've never done that before. I didn't know what I was stepping into. The wind change, when it did come through, it made it very hard to see. The smoke was so thick you just couldn't see. So you didn't know really where it was, how far off the fire was, because just the smoke, it was like going through pea soup, or like your fog. Our thing for finding out what was going on was listening, because that's the only way you could tell where the fire was to listen. That initial Sunday, there were appliances going everywhere and just trying to do asset protection, because that fire travelled so fast that, it beat a lot of people.
The tug of war over aircraft continues.
Well, it can do that. I think what we're basically saying is where do you see the highest priority asset protection need? We're waiting. It's going to call it, but I think it'll go to Anarchy. They've just called the MFB in down there as well to try and do asset protection. They can't even slow this thing down. So we're at Anarchy.
Within, I'd say, half an hour of the wind change, we saw the first smoke.
At first we put foil in all the cracks in the front wall and above both the doors, and wet towels under the doors. And we put the cat in my bedroom and put a wet towel at the bottom of the door so no smoke would get in. And the dog's in the bathroom with some chickens.
Within minutes of seeing that smoke, we were on fire here.
And when embers started coming in, I was downstairs with the bucket.
The ember attack was so fierce, I didn't expect that either. I really expected an ember attack to be pretty well insignificant. It just started a little fire here and there, but it was just like hail.
But upstairs, it caught a light on the doona, and some landed on the couch, but I don't think they caught. and Grandma put those ones out with the mop.
I sort of just crouched down beside the house and thought, oh my God, what have I done? What have we done? Have we done the right thing here? And then I thought, no, get up, don't be so stupid, and stood back up again and just went on with it.
I was really scared before it came, but then once it got there, you didn't have time to be scared.
If I could give my kids a medal for bravery, they'd both get one. Yeah, let's have a squeeze. What do you got? People would say, well, what does it matter? It's only a house, but it's not just a house. It's my house. And it's the house that we built as a family. That's important to me. Very important.
As more residents evacuate Anarchy, emergency services have roadblocked the area to stop sightseers.
I've had a text message saying, don't get your knickers in and not read the rubber knickers, Kathy. But there's a kiss on the end of it, so I think that's a bit tongue-in-cheek.
For the first time ever, ABC Radio is providing 24-hour continuous coverage of the bushfire emergency.
And for those residents affected by the Anarchy fires, we've heard that Anarchy was basically now under asset protection. That community under threat. There is an emergency relief centre for residents of Anarchy, and that's at Centenary Hall in Cox Road in Corio.
You're not going to be able to go back to your houses in the area tonight. This property or Centenary Hall will be open all night for those people. It'll be a recovery centre for anyone who wants to stay here. Food, we'll have beds, we'll have for anyone who needs accommodation. One of the key elements we do need you people though is to register with the Red Cross before you go, so we know that you're all being catered, because if we do get phone calls or whatever, so before you go, can everyone register?
Probably one of the hardest decisions. This might sound silly, but I live just outside of the township, and I was actually here on the fire ground all the time, and I had to walk away and leave my wife at home to look after her own place by herself at home. It was always in the back of my mind on where the fire was running to and how she was coping at home, but there again, you've got to stay focused on the job, and you fight the fire where you are. We were getting a lot of spotting activity, burning embers coming out of the bush, lighting the grasslands up, and you'd think you'd be at the front of the fire, and you'd look behind you and the fire had actually taken off behind you again. Go! And we're forever falling back, so in the end we made the decision to fall right back to the road and let the fire come through to the road where we had that clear break in fuel and could manage it and get resources along that road edge.
Lorraine is a hobby farmer in Yallourn North. Good evening to you, Lorraine.
How are you?
What's it doing?
It's about somewhere between 2 and 3 k's from me, and it's looking straight at me, coming towards me, but the wind's dropped off to zilch.
Robin, how different are the conditions this evening as to what you experienced on New Year's Eve?
I think it's a bit wilder. It seems a bit wilder. New Year's Eve was hot and furious and fast and going in one direction. Unbelievable that it's happening again so fast.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi, dear.
You stayed home during the fire, did you?
Oh, well, I started, but it got a bit hot.
Yes, I imagined.
I've been in Wollora over 50 years.
And have you ever seen something like this before?
No, never.
I'm actually up on top of the Brisbane Ranges. We live in the Ranges.
So what can you see from up there?
Well, you can see, of course, a lot of bright glow. Yeah, it's huge. It's absolutely huge.
I've got a text message here. It's sent from a couple of DSC firefighters who are in the Grampians saying, "Hi Sam, we're a group of DSC firefighters at the Grampians fire. We've been here since Friday. We started at 7 a.m. yesterday and we're still at it."
My goodness me.
The way the fire behaved on the Sunday night, the fire started burning out of fingers.
At the Blue Spot Road, John residents were blowing fire all around him, and he followed the police to go and capture him or take him.
You protect one asset or house, and the nature of the beast is that the fire would move past that area, so you'd have to drive back out through it, get to the next place, drive back into it again to protect the next property.
This video is recorded by a DSE firefighter at the Grampians on Sunday night.
Victoria, as soon as we get a chance. Over. Strike 501. Did you copy the channel change?
More information coming up on those Gippsland fires and Anarchy and others still burning on this extreme fire day. One to go down in history, I would imagine.
Good morning, John Thompson with ABC News. Thousands of firefighters are continuing to battle several major bushfires burning in Victoria. Major fire fronts are burning in the Mundara, Erica and Pauls Gap areas and in the Grampians. It's feared several homes have been lost, but the Country Fire Authority says the extent of the damage won't be known until first light. The CFA has confirmed that some homes have been destroyed in the town of Anarchy, north of Geelong.
I thought we were coming home to a house. I honestly not once thought that we were going to be burnt out. Well, we drove in the driveway when we came back and it was just a lot of ash and twisted tin, and it was just an overwhelming shock that there was nothing standing at all. Our children lost everything, but our kids lost everything, and everything was just so dry and black and eerie and lonely. Incredibly lonely.
Sunday the 22nd of January is the worst day of bushfires Victoria has seen for years. More than 70 fires are still burning across the state. Of most concern is the blaze at the Grampians National Park, where almost 100,000 hectares has been burnt. And with scorching temperatures and strong northerly winds predicted for Australia Day, just 4 days away, the worst could be yet to come.
Morning, Kate Draper with ABC News. Homes and community assets have been lost across the state as firefighters continue to tackle major blazes that are burning out of control.
To say that yesterday's weather conditions were atrocious was an understatement.
We are aware of significant stock.
Would it be correct to say there's somewhere between 5 and 10 homes lost?
It's possible.
Yeah, it was pretty hard kicking through the ashes looking for little bits and pieces, but there's not much there at all.
There are still 3 or 4 serious fires that need to be dealt with today, and warnings from the Bureau that the rest of this week is one of high alert, with certainly Australia Day Thursday and the weekend looking as if they are the sorts of days that you really wish just didn't happen.
Fire crews have just a few days to backburn and build control lines around the major fires before the next wave of extreme weather arrives. If they don't get these blazes under control, the fires could develop into full-blown disasters. Some firefighters have been working almost non-stop for 5 days. Over 90% of them are volunteers.
People, particularly city dwellers, often fail to appreciate that when they see
the truck with people in uniforms, the chances are, unless it's in a central business district, that vehicle and those firefighters are volunteers. They sacrifice, many of them, time with their family. They sacrifice opportunities to engage in recreation. They sacrifice often opportunities for Christmas holidays with their family, because down here in the southeast, that's the height of our fire season.
I think being a volunteer is, well, put it this way, someone's got to do it. It has to be done. Like, if it wasn't for the CFA volunteers in this state would have burnt down a long time ago. Like, there'd be nothing left.
But volunteer numbers have been dropping for the past 10 years. They're finding it harder to get time off work. The population is getting older. And the tree changers who are moving from the city into rural areas just aren't joining up.
It is difficult to get them involved in the volunteer bushfire brigade movement because protecting themselves doesn't really come into their thinking. They're not protecting their livelihood because their livelihood's in the city where they earn their money. And this is bringing a change right through into the volunteer movement.
The same people do the same thing all the time. And it doesn't matter what it is. It seems to be the same volunteers all the time. But all country towns are like that.
Go left!
The cost of replacing volunteers by paid firefighters would be prohibitive if we were to try and maintain the level of community protection that the community presently enjoys. It would be impossible.
Well, I think we've got to check the house will be pretty safe at the moment. We've got plenty of tankers on it and the sky crane's helping out really well. I'm a fire. I just come in from another region, so I just saw the house in trouble and started helping with the hosing down.
Coralie in Tangel South. Morning, Coralie.
I just wanted to thank the helicopter pilot that saved our property yesterday afternoon.
Right.
And the helicopter pilot worked all the afternoon dropping water from his great big bucket, and he took the water from our neighbour's dam and dropped it behind the houses. So he stopped all that fire coming through because it was a shocking north wind blowing, and he worked the whole afternoon, and I'm so grateful to him.
Graham Fountain is Deputy Chief Officer at the CFA. Graham, good morning.
We need to make sure that we're well rested. We're prioritising resources today and doing a lot of planning to make sure that we've got crews rested for an increase in the weather conditions later this week.
Weather conditions are really the major factor in how a fire is managed. I mean, paradoxically, with big bushfires, you don't actually fight them. I mean, you can't. The sheer energies involved. So you pinch them in at the sides. You plan where you're likely to be able to halt them so that they run out of fuel. You pray for rain. So firefighting is probably the wrong term, but fire management is better with these really big ones.
Right now, fire strategists are working out how to best manage their resources and take advantage of today's milder weather.
Our mission today is to bring the fire under control.
They have managed to confine the Anarchy blaze, but the Gippsland fire is still expanding. And the fire at the Grampians continues on its destructive path and is threatening the small tourist town of Halls Gap. Crews begin building a control line just south of town. As they battle to halt the fires, tragic news breaks.
2 people have been killed in a crash at Moyston, one of the Grampians towns still under threat from bushfires. Police say the accident happened about 10 to 9 last night, but the bodies weren't discovered until early this morning. Police say it's not possible to say if the 2 died as a result of the accident or the fires.
Please come in. I think we'll come into the shot if we could, please. I would like to be here and say to you that the worst is over, but the worst is not over. We have a very, very high alert fire situation which will occur on Thursday, on Australia Day, which will go through to the weekend.
What we're working through here strategically now is to get relief in, and we're bringing crews in from elsewhere around the state, and we are also looking interstate to get relief. And the idea is by Thursday that we have fresh people there ready to go.
And Commissioner, do you have any information as to whether the fatal accident today was anywhere linked to the fire?
At this stage, that location is a fire hotspot, and so our teams are heading there. Also, disaster victim identification are on the way as well, to be able to determine who the people are involved and whether or not it was the accident, they're trying to perhaps escape the fire, or what the situation was. Our team's on the way and will conduct that full and thorough investigation for the coroner.
But there's more tragic news ahead.
Good evening. Victoria's volunteer firefighters continued on with their work today, burdened by the loss of one of their own.
This CFA tanker had just been refilled with water for mopping up operations in the Strathbogie Ranges. On board was Captain Trevor Day and 3 other volunteers.
We're driving up a dozer track and the truck just slid and rolled down the hill.
Marianne Murdoch and the 2 others suffered minor injuries. Captain Day died at the scene. His friends say the CFA was his life. His wife Tracy Day is the group communications officer, and 3 of their 4 children are junior members.
They just love the CFA. It's like a big family. The CFA is like a family.
When one of our firefighters die, particularly on the fire ground, it rips your heart out. There is no doubt about it, from the top to the bottom of this organisation.
There will be nothing that will overcome the impact of being phoned up and said that one of our people have died. Within a few seconds of something like that happening, the whole of CFA knows. You know, mobile phones, SMSs, it is just a domino effect across the organisation. The first thing that goes to your mind is, how many children did they have? What's the family? Who was at the fire? And then what flows on to that is the community, how are they affected? All of these are small communities. How does that affect the town when these people are well known? And then what really goes to your mind is, how can we ever stop this from happening again?
What I try to teach people is that when you get a lull in the weather after a severe day, that's when you've got to really concentrate, because that's the time when you can relax a little bit and you may be more likely that that's when an accident will occur.
Yeah, can you send another couple of slip-ons up here, mate? Just 2, and we'll try and get these flames out at the back of his house.
We'll have a news update in just a moment, but Ian's called in from Pomona. Hi, Ian.
Morning. It was this awesome red glow, almost from south to north.
It's quite an amazing sight, very eerie, but quite beautiful and scary at the same time.
It's been a very stressful day.
In the dark, all you can see is the mountains lit up with the embers of the remaining forest.
And daybreak will come when the next wind change comes through, and it could all come back all on top of them again yet.
Firefighters step up back burning to control major fires. The fire has threatened the towns of Pomonal, Halls Gap and Stawell and has moved into difficult terrain. Some property is believed to have been lost in the Grampians, as well as near Anarchy. The fire has destroyed more than 6,000 hectares of national park in the Brisbane Ranges.
Yeah, usually what happens is that there's pictures of flames and burnt forest or burnt heathland, and the voiceover says 6,500 hectares of country was destroyed. That's not the case. What happens is that, yes, the fire's been through, the vegetation's been burnt, but that's not destroyed. Some animals and plants will survive. There'll be seeds that start to germinate. Populations of animals will start to breed and those kinds of things. So the landscape, the forest, the heathland isn't destroyed. It's been burnt and disturbed, but that's not destroyed. Some animals will survive in burrows, within hollows in trees, and their populations will hardly change. Other species will actually do quite well. Perhaps they feed on new shoots or grasses that are brought up by the fire, and those populations might actually increase directly after the fire. Yet again, other populations may take a long, long time to recover, if they ever do, and probably a good example species would be the koala.
Colleen from Rawson, good morning. Welcome to the Open Line.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well.
We're pretty smoked out down this way, so I have no idea what's happening. The other thing we do here is we run the wildlife shelter.
Yes.
And we've certainly been snowballed with more animals. So we're just sitting under, I guess we've got in just under 20 koalas now.
Are they injured or just stressed?
They are injured. They're burnt. Some of them are actually blind. They've got blistering over their eyes, ulcerations.
In Gippsland, volunteer wildlife carer Colleen Wood is inundated with dozens of burnt animals brought to her by concerned locals and firefighters.
We had to immediately drop what we were doing, rehydrate the animals, sedate them enough to be able to go over injuries and dress wounds, and no sooner had you done that, another one had come in, or you'd be, threatened with ember attack. And I can remember literally putting down a drip and just having to go outside and deal with what was to come. And it was like, but I haven't finished in the house. Okay, this is Jeremy here. He's one of our really burnt males. He came in with severe pneumonia too. As you can see, his ears, he's lost a partial amount of his ears. The vet's been keeping his eye on that. Burns to his face, burns to his nose. He had burns to his feet. We picked him up down on a property at Sanini's Track. We actually took him down from a tree with his raspy breathing, and you could literally smell on his breath the smoke of the fire. It was just absolutely horrible. So he's a miracle to have survived. But he'll be released probably another month or two down the track, which will be brilliant. Won't it, boy? Hey? You're such a handsome boy, even though you've got no ears, or not much of ears. Oh, that's nice.
A desperate call for more interstate firefighters.
The biggest problem for crews remains the 90,000 hectare Grampians blaze that came within a few hundred metres of Hall's Gap last night.
The Country Fire Authority reminds you if you live in the high-risk area to implement your personal fire plan, and if you're planning to leave your property, do so early.
More than 200 people have gathered in Stawell to hear an update on the fire's movement. Many were Halls Gap residents concerned about their properties.
Your emotions are up and down because you hear it's okay, then it's not okay. Hear it's okay, not okay.
I don't have any feeling. I feel totally empty because I don't know and I can't do anything.
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit, like my heart's racing a little bit, just because we've only been here for 12 months and we've just tried to make a start, and people across the road have left, and people down the road have left, so it is scary, it really is. But look, he just said make a decision, didn't he? He said right now, have to do it now. If we go now, because within half an hour it just goes straight through, so yeah.
I mean, we're going to stay and we're going to try and look after things the best we can, and we've got livestock here and everything's under protection, so we're going to do the best we can.
Having the fire surrounding us on both sides of the range was certainly a little bit confronting.
Few people have had experience of fires, so it's new to them. They typically don't know what to expect. When it's being pushed toward your dwelling by a wind, there's going to be noise, there's going to be embers, ash, smoke. It's going to be a very, very scary sight. Now, the tendency there will be to get very frightened and to want to run away, but that's absolutely the worst circumstances to do so.
If you're in a car driving, you're likely to find that there's no visibility, which means that you will almost certainly run off the road if you keep driving. And if you run off the road, you'll probably run onto something that's on fire. Even though it may not burn, the air inside the car can reach very high temperatures. Intense heat from the fire might be around for 10 minutes. It's more than enough time for the air inside the car to almost get to cooking temperature.
And we've got to talk about it all the time, because it's not something that only occurs once in a lifetime. Every summer Victorians have to face this, and most people think, oh, it won't happen to me, but it will. You could be out driving somewhere in the country and be faced with a bushfire. You've got to know what to do. Don't expect someone to come along and save your neck. You've got to do it yourself. Everyone's got to be educated on what to do.
If you are caught in the fire, you stay in a cleared area, turn your lights on, turn your hazard lights on, windows up, stay below the window level, put a blanket over yourself, and you need to be prepared if you're going to travel in that fire situation.
We could say that being in a car is better than being wandering around on foot, but that's about all you can say about it.
The Grampians fire has jumped the main containment line to the south of Hall's Gap. Firefighters must now attempt to establish new breaks closer to town. Crews fight fire with fire, backburning to reduce fuel in the fire's path.
Position is still good. Clear to continue. Roger, clear to continue. Roger, hooking up the second pair.
Southeastern Australia is the most bushfire-prone area in the world. And with the constant threat of outbreaks, fire agencies have had to develop rigorous training regimes.
Ready to repel 2. Roger, clear to repel. They've gone. Got away nicely. 30 to run, 20 to run, 10. Weight's going to come off now. We have 2 on the ground. They are unhooking.
Down there, stay out of the smoke.
All Victorian firefighters, both professional and volunteer, undergo intensive training.
Second 38 off here. All right.
Every year, about 30,000 people train with the CFA and DSE.
Get round behind it, Don. Round behind it. There's fuel running down the line.
Right, this is your task. The group of 3 will be doing a primary search, working from the main entry door, which we'll show you. They're going to operate from the left.
In one of the toughest training exercises, these CFA recruits have their vision obscured and are made to search a burnt-out building. In the pitch black and assaulted by recorded screams, they must locate and save dummy casualties.
Come on, let's go!
Infrared cameras reveal the chaos.
How long does it take to do a primary search? Get in that tunnel, let's go! Get down on your belly, get in there, watch the cylinder. People are counting on you guys, come on! Communicate, guys, communicate! Go straight ahead into the pipe room. Got a casualty! Got a casualty! Let's go, Harry! Come on, guys, work together, come on! Carry that casualty properly, come on!
By the time they graduate, these recruits will be well prepared to tackle fires in houses and other buildings as well as wildfires. The wildfire around Hall's Gap is still raging, and crews are continuing their attempts to build control lines to stop the fire's progress towards the town.
You're there to put it out, and you're there to beat it. So, the way we all see it is, well, we're there to put it out, so we'll just put the damn thing out. You know, if it takes 2 hours, it takes 10 days.
As another day of fires dawns, the mercury begins to rise. In the past few days, more than 20 houses have been destroyed, and some 60,000 animals have burnt to death. The Australian fire services offer each other support in times of need. 150 firefighters from New South Wales arrive to lend a hand.
We still have some significant fires burning, and 2 of major concern to us are, of course, the Grampians fire, which I visited yesterday, and you know that Hall's Gap has largely been evacuated. The fire keeps trying to come back to Hall's Gap, and of course we have grave concerns for the Grampians fire tomorrow when we have northerly winds and some very, very severe conditions. Some of our professional and volunteer firefighters have been fighting fires since New Year's Day. And of course it's important that we have fresh ranks ready for what is going to be an intense day tomorrow with 40-degree temperatures, probably the biggest firefight we've had spread right across the state.
It's going to be a long night for fire crews at the Grampians National Park. For the remaining residents of Hall's Gap, it's now a waiting game.
We're just sitting here watching the fires.
But for firefighters, the clock is ticking. It's their last chance to complete containment lines before the Australia Day scorcher arrives.
It's been a big job. It's a long haul for a lot of people. It's a long way from over yet. We'll get there. Crews will have a spell and
see what happens a bit later. So that's all we can do at the moment, but hopefully Halls Gap will still be here for another year or two.
With just hours to dawn, fire crews get the first good news they've had for days. Temperature predictions have been slightly downgraded, and a cool front is expected to sweep across the state. This time, it's a welcome change, bringing high humidity and the possibility of showers. But just when it will arrive, no one knows.
Today has been declared a day of total fire ban in the
There's no
northeastern
respite for fire crews fighting 4 major blazes across the state.
Victorian firefighters are preparing to protect homes as northerly winds push the fires in a southerly direction.
Everyone's on edge, especially all the residents close to the Grampians, of course.
Weather Bureau's Jeff Kitchen says it's hard to tell if storm activity over the Grampians will deliver much rain.
Shower storm activity may provide some relief. Of course, the fire's fairly big, so it really depends how much rainfall and how widespread the rainfall is.
Right now in Halls Gap, it's 40 degrees and there's a strong, hot northerly wind. The town is surrounded by fire and thick plumes of smoke. There was a light sun shower in the town not long ago, but it wasn't enough to douse the nearby flames, nor to drop the temperature in the town.
All day, crews have been wrestling the fire for control, desperately trying to hold the lines long enough for the cool front to blow across from South Australia. Then, finally, in the late afternoon, the promised change arrives.
We had the fan running in the bedroom because it was very hot, and I thought, yeah, that fan's noisy. Oh my God, it's rain.
For some crews, it's their first chance in days to relax and exchange war stories.
We probably put more fires out the last 10 days than we have in probably 15, 20 years. And the boys have been working 24/7 here. And we just we haven't stopped.
It's not a lot of rain. The high humidity is enough to dampen the blaze and bring some relief. But it's a long way from putting the fire out. In the end, it was a mixture of good management and good luck. But Halls Gap, for the moment at least, is saved.
The day after Australia Day, I flew part of the fire in a helicopter, and we flew for an hour, and we only saw a portion of the fire, and that to me hit home just how big that fire was. Still a lot of summer to go, and sometimes you can get caught out where you think you've been through the worst of it and people slacken off. It only takes one bad day and people and property can be at risk. Simple as that. So every year, every summer, we've got to be careful.
Every summer, we fight bushfires in southeastern Australia. Some, like the 1939 fires, prove impossible to control.
Bushfire. Stark horror sweeps upon the Gippsland forests of Victoria as the most terrible fires for years race across the timber-clad mountains, leaving death and desolation in their trail. All through the summer night, the long lines of flames surge irresistibly on. Hundreds of hair's-breadth escapes are recorded, and even as cameramen dare the searing heat to secure this dramatic pictorial record, the death roll reaches 20, with more feared lost in the Holocaust.
One survivor of the inferno was Margaret Marsland, who vividly recalls her childhood experience.
There was 2 fires coming, so we just was hemmed off and just had to go and stay in the river. So we stayed in the Tangel River for 3 hours. I couldn't swim, none of us could swim, and I think it was a case of you either had to get in the water or perish by the fire. That was the only choice you had, so we just had to jump into the water. It was after you got out when you realised that you were nearly burnt to death.
Thousands of square miles of blackened ruin. 71 lives were lost. Travellers on the highway were trapped and perished. Whole townships were obliterated in a few minutes.
I have unbelievable sympathy for the people and the stories that I heard in Black Friday. It was nothing short of horrific, and I can only, I just can't contemplate how some of the people have carried some of their experiences for so long. And I guess when I think back to 39 and you think about the Great Depression, you think about the fires, you think about the Great War, and you think about people that then hopefully lived through those 3 horrible experiences and then were just expected to get on with their lives. There was no such thing as counselling, critical incident stress. There was no such thing as a medical technology for dealing with burns. There weren't the firefighting resources. There were no water bombing. There were no planes or Elvis helicopters. There's nothing like the whole of government, whole of state arrangements that exist now. There's nothing like the sophisticated fire appliances, nothing like the sophisticated protective clothing that firefighters now wear, nothing like the 60 helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft that were used in the fire season in Victoria.
The 1939 fires led to the formation of the Country Fire Authority and changed the face of firefighting in Victoria. Fire agencies now use new technology to try to contain bushfires. But it's all emergency management. To help prevent such fires in the first place, fire itself can be used as a tool. Land managers deliberately burn large areas of the state to help reduce the amount of undergrowth, the fuel for bushfires.
Fuel reduction burning, planned fire, is just an incredibly important part of the firefighter's toolkit. If it's not available, then the bush will create an awful lot of fuel load and the fires will be very, very difficult to control, very, very difficult to contain.
Just up ahead here you can see on the right-hand side where the wildfire has come through, and on the left-hand side we've got unburnt, which was one of our fuel reduction burns we did a couple of years ago, and you can see the contrast in the vegetation.
But sometimes controlled burns get out of control. In April 2005, a small planned burn in Wilson's Promontory National Park escaped and ripped through large areas of bush. Lessons have been learnt, but it's still a challenge to get prescribed burning right. A year on, and a whole new set of plants has grown from the ash.
There's a very short window in which you can do prescribed burning. For long periods of time in the year, it's too wet. A lot of times in the year, it's too dry and hot, and the risks of a prescribed fire turning into an unplanned wildfire are fairly substantial. And as always with these things, there's a lot more complexity that underpins this than I think the average punter out there recognises.
A total fire ban remains until midnight, and there's a strong wind warning for all Victorian coastal waters.
The January bushfires are now a distant memory. After a month of mild weather, it's early March, and the heat is back again.
Mick from Ballarat has called us here in the studio. He was very quick to spot some smoke in the Snake Valley area. Snake Valley is about 25 kilometres southwest of Ballarat. Phil, what's the latest, please?
It's running very hard at the moment. We have 3 air attack bombers on their way. They're not here yet. And CFA and DC have both got people on the ground at the moment.
A bushfire near Ballarat in Victoria's west is intensifying with an unconfirmed report that a house has been destroyed. About 250 firefighters are battling the blaze over more than 500 hectares at Snake Valley.
It turned to night time in a matter of 10 minutes. It was shocking. It was just coming in that way, it was really, really black.
Latest information is that things are getting a little bit worse.
There was a 20-foot wall of fire coming towards us.
And it was huge, all this red embers just going up in the air.
Just one more thing before I let you go. You said that you've been advised that some houses are on fire in that area. Do you know how many?
We believe that there are 2 burning as we speak, and we believe there's up to a dozen under immediate threat.
Dean, what can you tell us about weather at the moment for this particular fire?
There's certainly going to be rain over the fire overnight, and it looks like there will be a decent dump of rain overnight.
Just very disappointing to see these sort of fires that I hear are deliberately lit.
And who's telling you that?
Well, we've heard that from CFA people, and yeah, it's not good. That's not good.
Bring him here. Just bring him here. Yeah. He won't leave. No, you know, it's just, I can't understand how people do this. Just go around lighting fires, you know. It's just, but yeah. There'll be a few here. I'd be very happy to find him. But of course it's never going to happen, is it?
No.
No.
75 and 80% of fires in southeastern Australia are started by people. Only 20 to 25% of fires are started by natural causes such as lightning.
Even when the cause is lightning, every fire has its source investigated.
Whilst first attending crews can tell you roughly where a fire started and all the rest of it, you've got to reconstruct the path of the fire from where it eventuated back to its source.
Come up there, see where it's come from. And you can see the lightning struck tree there now.
There's deliberate starts where people actually light a fire for a reason, and it gets away. And then there's people who light fires maliciously with the intent of actually causing damage, and that's what we call arson.
Jeff Pike's mission is to find clues to help track down the arsonist. To begin with, he has to get the bush to tell the story of the fire.
So with the arrow, what I'll do is just point that at the direction of where I think where the pattern's indicating the fire's coming from. And then when I've got a sequence of them, I'll just look at where they're all pointing in the general direction of and work out approximately where the zone of origin of the fire is. There'll generally be charcoal evidence of a man-made shape, like the shape of a match, the shape of a candle, or even a cigarette butt. I found something that doesn't look natural. It looks it's actually a bit like a match. I'm going to photograph it and photograph its context inside this zone of origin here.
The match is taken to forensic experts so the DNA of the wood can be tested. It can be traced back to the box it came from and used as extra evidence to help convict the arsonist. Jeff and his team also interviewed locals and those first on the scene to gather clues as to who was in the area at the time.
In terms of are you going to get caught, the answer is ultimately yes, you will get caught, because we will continue to investigate, and we won't stop until we get to an end state. Either they stop or they get put in a place where they can't. So
it's a very difficult crime for law enforcement because of the evidence is destroyed and so on, and it's a hard crime to prove in a criminal court.
Rebecca Dooley develops offender profiles to help police and fire agencies narrow down the list of suspects.
My focus is on the psychology of it. So my first question is, are they an arsonist in a psychological sense? The serial arsonist, typically male, aged somewhere between 17 and 27. They tend to be underachievers educationally. They may have social difficulties, so they tend to be on the outer edge of the crowd. I wouldn't call them loners as such, but they're not well integrated in the community.
This season has seen 2 major fires caused by arson. It's been 6 weeks since the first one in Erica, and the arsonist is still out there.
Well, I can't say how I feel on TV, it'd be barred, okay? But let's just say that sign that says death penalty for arsonists, yeah. And that bloke ought to hope that the police get him before the townspeople get him.
The brigades that fought those fires
were angry, very, very angry for a long time afterwards, and rightfully so. They shouldn't be put in danger. They shouldn't have the community put in danger by someone who is irresponsible, stupid, or has a mental condition which means that they should be put away.
I have asked the arsonists in my studies whether they intended to light the fire, whether they felt in control at the time of lighting the fire, did they think of the consequences before they lit the fire, did they feel remorse afterwards? And overwhelmingly, they knew what they were doing, they understood the consequences, they were in control at the time, and they did it anyway, and they're not sorry for it.
There is no time for anyone that lights fires like that. Unfortunately, within our own ranks, that sometimes occurs. It's not pleasant, but we have an organisation of 60,000 people.
The problem with firefighter arson is that it's such a small percentage of our firefighting population, and yet it gets such a huge amount of interest, obviously, because it's scandalous and so on. And its effect, when it happens, its effect is disproportionately great, both on the community's faith in the service as much as in the service's faith in each other.
So the hunt for the arsonists continues. But that's not the only work going on as a result of the 500 or so bushfires in Victoria this summer. While some things will recover by themselves, others will benefit from a helping hand.
It was definitely heartbreaking to see a place that you work in and you do love and that you're passionate about to be burnt. As a park manager, the last thing you want to see is 46% of a significant area being fire affected. But you definitely have to have a glass half full approach. I'd like to think that the pockets of unburnt we have out here are little refuge areas and recolonisation areas. And I'd like to think things are still out there. They've evolved with fire and they should continue to exist into the future. Putting one in over here?
Yeah, just one behind us here.
The phase we're in the Grampians National Park at the moment is we're launching into, as of today, a 74,000 hectare fox baiting program to provide the best protection we can for the surviving animals in the park. Obviously, the fox predation range has opened up. They'll be able to hunt a lot more effectively in the open areas.
With less predators around, native animals will have a better chance of surviving. But for some of the native trees burnt in the fires, it's a different story.
Well, this one's the granddaddy red gum in the park. We measured this tree years and years ago. Measured 12,000 super feet. It takes 4,000 super feet of timber to build a house. This one would build 3 houses. I'd hate to say how old this tree is. I mean, it'd be well over 500-year-olds, no doubt about it. And unfortunately, this tree's got bark cracking. As you can see, if we look up, bark's starting to crack up here, quite a few places. If you look up the tree, you can see the bark cracking. That's a good indication that this tree will probably now die. It will still provide some sort of habitat, but the food source, apart from habitat, is lost. It'll take such a long time to replace them again.
What we have is a tourist environment that has been devastated. And most of the tourist operators around there depended on the summer period for the rest of the year. We have a role in assisting them to recover, to highlighting the benefits of tourism in those areas after the fire, and there are some significant things that you will never ever see again in the Grampians unless you go after the fire's gone through.
Everyone has probably felt it to a degree. It's far and wide. It's not just the people in the fire that actually feel the effects of the fire. There's, as I say, the business side of it, the emotional side of it. I know the people that were burnt out, the locals have been terrific trying to help them out. They've started to rebuild. I believe 2 of them already rebuilt. Our neighbours' frame went up last Friday, so they're on the way to being rebuilt. It was only a matter of weeks later and everything was back to beautiful, growing again. As you can see, the trees are all starting to sprout again. The grass is green. It looks beautiful with black sticks. We actually ran a little campaign, What's Big, Black and Beautiful with Green Spots. Hall's Gap, an oasis in the Grampians, and that was terrific.
Special buds lie under the bark of these eucalypts. They shoot a week or so after the fire. This new growth is toxic to native animals, allowing the trees to re-establish themselves. But it will be some time before these koalas get a taste of the wild. They're going for eye surgery to remove the cataracts they got from the heat of the bushfire, an operation that costs wildlife carer Colleen Wood $500 per eye.
It's rough, it's definitely filling in, and there's quite good vessels coming across. It's the first time that I think it's been done, that any eye surgery of that complexity has been done on koalas, and the first one's been done, and at this stage is extremely successful. She's actually seeing again. That was an absolute thrill to, at the end of the surgery, to see the cataracts gone from her eyes and to think she's going to see, and when she wakes up she's going to get a hell of a shock actually, so I think I can see again, and where am I? And
come on, you big sook.
After another month of healing, the koalas are ready to be released.
Come on. It's time to go. Time to go. Going back out in the bush today, a big day.
She selected a patch of unburnt bushland with all the right trees for these fussy eaters.
So out here is that there's a mixture of silvertop, messmate and blue gum. There's different types of peppermint species and there's also manna gum, so they'll be quite comfortable here.
Studies have shown that these koalas have the same chance of survival as any other healthy wild koala.
Come on, out you go, out you go. That's it, that's it. Beautiful. Off you go. You're free to go now. Good girl. Okay, Teletubby, your turn. There you go, follow her up. There you go. She'll look after you. Yes, she will. I'll see you later. Bye, boys. You go now. Come on. Okay. Good boy. Oh, come on. Oh, you go careful up that silvertop, boy. It's going up the tree without any problems, so yeah, no, he'll do well. Quite often we'll find they'll be quite vocal on release, and I think it's more of an alert one to hear who's around. Even with the koalas we've put back in their own area, they do the same thing, and you'll quite often get a call back and it's like, hey, I'm back home. So, yeah, but it can go on all night. And probably better is not getting a lot of calls back too, because it means there's not many dominant males, or there's probably no dominant males within the area, so you'll do well.
But the koalas, like the rest of the bush, face increased fires in the future as climate change becomes a reality.
Climate change is something we should be concerned about now. The reason is that climate change is not just something that's going to happen in the future. We're in amongst climate change as we speak. In future, the weather may be unlike anything we've seen before. We expect more extreme heat waves, more severe thunderstorms and extreme rainfall events, more flooding and more intense bushfires.
It's March the 20th, and Queensland is being lashed by a violent tropical cyclone, something we may see more of in the future.
Certainly we seem to be getting more extreme weather events. All the indications are that we're going to have to deal with more fire more frequently. So the reality is, pragmatically, we have to plan to deal with these issues, whether they're caused by global warming or whether they're caused by just cyclical long-term climate change that we don't have the key to the pattern for yet. To me, it's irrelevant. We've still got to be able to respond and deal with the extreme events, respond and deal with the fire events that are actually occurring.
Our technology has certainly progressed, but we need more than just new technology. We need a better understanding of fire and how we fight it. CFA and the University of Melbourne are researching ways to improve how firefighters cope with extreme conditions. The heat, heavy protective clothing and long hours can lead to dehydration.
They will lose
probably up to a litre an hour of fluid, and if not replaced, it puts an increased physiological stress on the body. Increases in heart rate, increases in core temperature, increases in blood pressure, over and above the physical demands of the task. Now, the rise in core temperature is particularly interesting to our research group and particularly important to firefighters because there are negative consequences as core temperature rises. Around 40 degrees, people experience muscle weakness, disorientation, a loss of balance. And as we move towards 41 degrees, the brain sends a signal to stop doing this work to prevent the body overheating. At physiological temperatures exceeding 43 degrees, human beings tend to lose consciousness and death is usually the outcome. Fluid retention and fluid replacement tends to delay all of those stresses. So carbohydrate, electrolytes and water together provide the best fluid source for firefighters during their bushfire suppression.
Preparing for the future also means that we have to find the best way to fireproof our buildings. Justin Leonard from the CSIRO spends his time helping to make houses safer places to stay in bushfires. He uses a huge gas fire burner that simulates a bushfire, reaching temperatures of 1,000 degrees centigrade. Today, he's testing different types of window glass to see at what radiant heat level they break. If the window breaks, burning debris or embers from the fire could blow into the house and ignite furnishings.
See a gap already in the top left-hand corner where that flame's reaching now.
Justin's testing what happens if an ember ignites a room. It takes 1.5 minutes to reach flashover point, where everything burns simultaneously. His work is already being used in building codes for new houses in high-risk bushfire areas.
Now, there's a lot of work going into sort of helping people to protect those assets and to think about being fire safe and those kinds of things. But sometimes I think we need to step back from that and drill down more deeply and say, well, you know, is that a good place to build in the first place? And if not, why not? Some of those planning things probably ought to be more deeply considered if we're truly going to prepare for an environment which I suspect with climate change is going to see more intense fires, going to see more frequent fires in an increasingly dry environment.
Fires only get out of control when it's very hot, very dry and very windy. So having warning of approaching fire weather is crucial for fire agencies. On January the 18th, 2003, a firestorm hit the suburbs of Canberra. It was so intense and so unexpected, fire weather researcher Graham Mills decided to investigate.
It was an absolutely horrible day for fire weather in Canberra. I think it was one of the worst fire weather days ever. The wind gusts were up around 50 knots, the temperature was up around 40 degrees, the humidity dropped out to ridiculously low levels. All the ingredients for an extreme fire were there. Early in the morning of January 18, we can see this long dry slot bending down through southwestern New South Wales and across to south of Canberra. 3 hours later, it's looking darker and it's moved this way. Another 3 hours and it's approaching Canberra. And at about mid-afternoon, when the Canberra fires were really getting in the suburbs, the dry slot has moved right across the ACT and you can see a series of pyrocumulus and other thunderstorms developing on the axis of the dry slot as the dry air moves across the ACT.
Wet air suppresses fires, but dry air causes a fire to explode uncontrollably. Graham has now discovered other explosive fires were also exacerbated by these bands of extremely dry air 5 kilometres up in the atmosphere. The fire agencies want to use his research as soon as possible so they can predict when extreme fires are on their way. But our future isn't just in the hands of the fire agencies. Everyone has to take responsibility to deal with bushfires, because no amount of trucks or water-bombing aircraft will ever stop them. We're only just beginning to understand the dynamics of fire in this ever-changing climate. And the race is on to adapt to our increasingly fiery future.